And I use the word very deliberately because with clients, we do see a pretty transformational kind of a change whereby it's like, whoa, really? That's how the brain works? Ah, I get it. I know what to do about it. So that I think so is quite a great experience. So really today we are going to use some slides to share some information with you. And as Kate said, also give you a little glimpse about the ANC program that we are going to be launching in January, which I'm very excited about. But with your permission, I'm going to share some slides just to kind of guide us through this conversation. I'm joined today by Maria, who will introduce herself in a bit. But the objective that we really want to um, hopefully achieve today is offer you, a glimpse of how applied neuroscience can really enhance our coaching effectiveness for leadership development, life coaching. The applications are many, many, many. And over the last decade, I've used it across different topics, and I can see it's pretty valuable from that perspective. So really want to use this opportunity to do that. We've got about an hour, and what is it that we hope to today? Do a little bit, you all know me, but I'll just probably share a little bit about why neuroscience, why I brought that into my line of coaching. Maria will introduce herself, who's also going to be my co-faculty in the Applied Neuroscience program in 2025. We will go a little bit into why we feel, what is our narrative of why we think neuroscience is quite powerful for coaching. And actually, because you've given your valuable time, we're going to share some content with you, which gives you a glimpse of what neuroscience can do and what it can offer to you, and something that you'll be able to start using. And this is something that I've created, which is the limbic prefrontal cortex seesaw. So we'll present that and the application of it. Also, a personal takeaway, you will get to know in the next 50 minutes what your primary limbic response is and what you could do with it. And again, it's a great idea about how you could take it away for clients as well. We'll end today with a brief outline of what the Applied Neuroscience for Coaches program is going to be in 2025. And if there's interest in that, then definitely we will follow it in the next few weeks or month probably, with the details if you want to sign up. And if you have time, we'll do some quick Q&A. Important thing is, if you have questions by the end of today, that's great. If we run out of time, that's sometimes natural, but you know me, and we are part of the same group. So please feel free to reach out to me if you have any question, or if you want to have another discussion. I'll be more than happy to do that. So let me first maybe invite Maria, so we get your voice in, Maria. But just before she introduces herself, let me just tell you how we connected. I connected with Maria when I started off the idea of writing a book, and I knew it was going to be neuroscience based. And I was looking around my network and saying, who are the people I know who've done much? And there weren't that many. And then I went into this amazing meeting, and I saw Maria, and she was neuroscience and talking about it. And I was like, whoa, we got to connect. So actually, my first connection with her was through a meeting, which was a meeting of coaches. And she contributed to my book in chapter 1. About the brain and how it works. And since then, we have collaborated on quite a few programs. And we are also, I think so, peer support, coaches, supervisors for each other on the topic of neuroscience.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Chat
absolutely.
a lot with each other. So Maria, over to you for a brief intro.
So lovely to see you all. I'm Maria, as you can see from a little banner. I have been working to enhance people's peak performance for probably 25, maybe 30 years, she says, not wanting it to be maybe that long. I came out of education, so I am very interested in how the brain learns, which is what kind of took me to neuroscience, as well as being trained in a couple of different flavors of counseling. And I found neuroscience to be so powerful and so empowering. I've run my own business for the last 10 years. One of the highlights was being asked to contribute to a peer-reviewed global business magazine. So that was feeling very lovely. And I'm just passionate about people getting the very best out of themselves. I think people have limitless potential. And I just like sharing what I happen to know, but also learning. Like Reena said, we peer coach. We do the things because empowering people, to me, is just one of the things that I enjoy doing with my time. And it's lovely because we get paid for it too. So that's a little bit about me. We're going to do a little poll now to see how much experience you actually have in neuroscience. So if you could contribute to that, and it makes no difference in terms of whether you've done anything or nothing, because today we're definitely starting off from some of the fundamentals. So perfect. Has everyone had the opportunity to do that? Yeah, perfect. Okay, I'm going to hand back over to Reena. Let's get into our session. Okay, so self-learned. That's, I think, how a lot of us got into it, actually, that just fascination about how does the brain work now that we've got fMRIs and we can look. So excellent. Okay, Reena, take it away.
Thank you so much. And actually, the second point, which is the 58%, is also partly why we have designed this program, because there is a plethora of information out there. And some of the stuff we read, we go a little bit like, oh, really? You want to say that? That's a bit
Yeah,
misleading.
yeah,
And the second is, when there's so much, what do you focus your attention on? And because I guess we've been using it now, definitely I've integrated it into my coaching practice quite immensely for the last decade. So we kind of know which bits work. So are we neuroscientists? No, but we do know enough and solid information of neuroscience that we're applying and bringing it into the coaching practice. So really, that's also one of the reasons why we did it. In fact, that is the reason why I brought neuroscience into my coaching practice. Uh, Actually, when I moved from India to UK, probably that was when I first understood that there was merit to do it, because I thought, well, there are some things that my first reaction was, I wish people in the Western world knew something which Indians know, because a lot of neuroscience is grounded in Ayurveda, which is the ancient science from India. And vice versa, I also thought, I wish Indians knew a lot of things that Western people did. So I knew it was an and therefore it was bringing the two together, and that became part of my journey. And I started studying intentionally. I coach myself in energy leadership. You're going to see a glimpse of it today, which is based on science. I did an MIT Sloan certification because I wanted to really progress, because it's a subject that's evolving. So probably that's my story of how I got into it, which kind of takes me into a little bit about why neuroscience and coaching. So hello, welcome to the brain. um, it's as heavy as our Mac Airbook, actually. So you're talking about 1.2 to 1.5 kilos. So you know immediately, versus my body weight, it's a very tiny percentage, but it's using up 20% of my energy. And why? Not surprisingly, because it's got 100 trillion cells and billions of connections. The images you're seeing there are actually neurons, and that's how they connect. So I heard a lovely podcast by Stephen Fry called Inside Your Brain. Highly recommend it. Very entertaining, but based in science. And he actually makes the statement that if you put all the neurons that we have in our body one after the other, you could probably circle the earth 15 times. So just trying to think of the enormity of connections that are out there. So it requires that energy. And the way that it works is it's systems and subsystems, and they're integrated and they're kind of coordinated, working with each other. Brain is not between our ears only. The neurons are shot through a body. That's what neuroscience has got to our knowledge. But sadly, all of us are trained only to really use the brain between our ears. So immediately as a coach, you start realizing, oh, they are not accessing all the intelligence. So can we help them get the full intelligence and use all the power, because that's not the only brain. But the interesting thing is that the brain between the ears does have lead control. And so therefore, to really help them understand the mechanism of how that works is also quite powerful, because the rules and the mechanisms of how the brain works controls emotions, decisions, behaviors, well-being, all the kind of topics that we as coaches kind of use. So it gives you a science-based approach in offering them tools around it, which is quite powerful. And also why it's important is because there's a difference between conscious behavior and these rules. And let me just say that in another way through an example. I might choose to sleep for less number of hours. That's under my control. I might say I'm going to sleep just for 5 hours, 4 hours, not sleep that much. But the body and the mind and the brain has strict rules, because when it has sleep deprivation, it goes into not being that productive. We know that. So it's important for them to understand the rules and mechanism of how the brain is working is non-negotiable. So therefore, they need to change and flex, because that's going to be impacted even if they are kind of managing themselves differently. So that's another reason why we want to talk about it. And it's an evolving subject. We will say that upfront and caveated. Will maybe there's some things that will change tomorrow, but I think we know enough about the brain to have a solid foundation. And because it started linking up to age practices, we think it's something that's really useful to bring in a cohesive way, so that we are offering as coaches a clear narrative, which is science-based, which can empower clients. So I think from my perspective, that's why I would say why neuroscience and coaching. Maria, you want to add on to from your perspective? And I know we've got a slide for you as well.
I think one of the things that I found most powerful and I was drawn to was that once we kind of know what the issue is, if we then know what mechanism we can leverage, suddenly everything calms, and that's the nervous system. So for me, it was very much about knowledge is power. And then I take it further and say, actually, it's applied knowledge that's power. Because like Reena said, there is so much information out there. Some of it's a bit bogus. A lot of it isn't, but there's so much. So to me, it was very much about taking people through a very understandable, layered and nested journey. So this bit does that, this bit does that, that equals this. And like Reena said, it's all about feelings, actions, behaviors. We're basically a chemical cocktail, but we get the chance to impact how we want to be in that. So I think that's one of the main reasons I came to neuroscience, because I'd come out of education. I'm like, well, what's the next big thing that's going to empower people? And the opportunity with neuroscience is the minute you realize that these systems work regardless, it allows you, when you're working with your clients, to work out what's universal. Is this your limbic system? Because everyone's limbic system does X, Y, and Z. It just. But also then to be able to take a deeper dive into what's specific. Because the thing is, all of our brain wiring is as unique as our fingerprints. So what's a solution for me, because of my experience and how my wiring evolved, is not necessarily the solution for somebody else. So I like the fact that you can park a lot of stuff and go, that's how brains work. And that kind of, I've seen the relief in so, especially CEOs, I've seen the relief in people going, oh, it's not just me then. So I think that's really powerful. It gives us, when you see which systems are activated, how they're interacting, it means that you can intentionally build better relationships because you're doing certain things, using certain strategies. It means that we can better manage life transitions, and life is perpetually transitioning at a massive pace nowadays. So the brain doesn't necessarily like change, but if we know why and which system we need to calm to allow it to change, that's really powerful. It allows us to be transformational, because the minute you start knowing the mechanisms, the creativity really budgeons up. It's incredible. The other thing that neuroscience brings is it gives us a real key insight into what choices we don't have, and there are some we do not have, but it opens up the perspective of so many other choices once you know which system you need to dampen down, which system you can leverage. And I really enjoy that, so that you get the opportunity to be more intentional. We're 95% subconscious, and that's quite a conservative estimate. Some neuroscientists have made it a higher number. And I like the fact that we get the intentionality so that we can influence change. And it does mean that we can definitely better manage ourselves within change and disruption. And disruption is really necessary in certain systems, not brain systems, but in certain systems in life at the moment. So that allowing ourselves to be intentionally managing that disruption definitely calms us down, or gives us a huge amount of energy we need to actually do it. So I think neuroscience adds a fundamental key level. I'm talking to a bunch of coaches who know a huge amount about a lot of stuff. So what I enjoy is its fundamental little things underneath, some of which actually, once you know a small amount of things, you actually can make huge and very impactful choices. So I really enjoyed that. So yeah, absolutely. So I'm now going to go on to the limbic PFC dance or seesaw, depending. Okay. How many people have heard of fight, flight, or freeze? That's kind of a very known use now. It's in the lexicon now of what we use. Actually, the limbic system, which determines the fight, flight, freeze response, is 150 million years old in mammals. It was found in the fossil record. It's one of the oldest systems in our brain. And because it's very old, unlike the 20% that the PFC uses, the limbic system is incredibly practiced at what it does. And it's where our early warning alarm system is. So here, the amygdala, located just above the ears, are scanning for danger 15 times a second outside our awareness, because the brain's job, its primary job, is to keep us alive. Yeah, so it's scanning for danger, threat 15 times a second. It makes no difference between physical threat or psychological threat. And that's a really important point to make, especially nowadays, because we don't have many physical threats, but we have a lot of psychological threats that are causing stress. I mean, you all know that and work with clients, so you're probably sharing that with you. So the amygdala will scan for danger if any type of danger, be it small or very, very important, is detected. A cascade of biological and psychological and chemical reactions occur. And this is where we have no choice. If I detect any kind of threat, my limbic system takes over, having got the information from the amygdala, and now all of the energy is taken away from every other brain system. And that's because it's shooting it down our spinal cord, readying us to fight, or freeze, or in extreme cases, faint. So we have no choice. It's automatic. It's instantaneous. It can happen before we become aware it's happening. You probably heard of things like people start running just before the bomb goes off, or those kind of things, because our brain is scanning. It doesn't always need to go through our conscious mind. It's automatically taking us away. So if we could go on to the next slide, the thing about, yeah, no, please do. Yeah.
Just another from a coach's perspective, just to layer on to what Maria's just said. The other interesting thing about the limbic system is it's not all bad, it's great as well. And it is the emotional cortex of the brain, which means anything, and I mean anything that you and I experience or anybody experiences is first filtered through the limbic system. Because as Maria was saying, it needs to check, is there a threat or no threat, right? By implication at coaches, it immediately raises our understanding that why emotions is important. Because and I know that emotional intelligence, people understanding, recognizing is zero. Nobody's really taught around it. So it flips the coin of saying this is why we really need to understand emotions and regulate it and manage it and mitigate it, because thoughts come after emotions. But sadly, we get to know about thoughts because the prefrontal cortex, which is used, which Maria will talk about, comes in later. So that's the other angle, is to really make them aware of it, of saying, that's why it's important for you to understand your emotions. And if, as Maria said, if your amygdala in the limbic system is alerted, then, well, it's fight, flight, freeze. And then she's going to take you to the narrative in the next slide.
Because the thing about fight, flight, freeze is it's very limited choices, but that is all the brain sees. Because the prefrontal cortex, located just behind here, it's got no energy running through it. So we cannot think. It's not that we don't choose to think, it's we cannot. That system is totally turned down. So what's really important to know is that when a client or yourself goes limbic, there are certain hacks, tips, and strategies you need to bring the thinking back into the equation. But if we are purely limbic, then we have no choice. It's either flight, we're either running away, we're freezing. And nowadays there's a lot of literature out about the fact that people are in functional freeze, i.e. they're able to do things, but they're not really thinking about the things. They're in that automatic pilot because the brain's made to keep us alive. So if you've got stress coming in, then you will be perpetually limbic. And the thing is, stress builds and builds and builds, and stress is a result of the limbic PFC seesaw, because cortisol is just released the minute that we become limbic, because it's there. I mean, cortisol's got a bit of a bad rap. It's there because it's the focus on this. Yeah, it's stress how important this is, and the brain's looking for the next threat. But if those are perpetual, then we end up being in a very functional freeze situation. So it's important to know that if anyone is limbic, they are not going to be thinking. So one of the things that as coaches we can do is we can ask the kind of questions that get people's PFC turned back on, so they start seeing the solutions. Because when I'm limbic, my field of vision narrows. That's in the physical world, but also in the psychological world. So I don't see solutions. But also, as Reena pointed out, our limbic system, yes, it's the early warning alarm system. Yes, it takes over and enslaves every other brain system when we are limbic in that threat response. But it's also the seat of or the processor of our emotions. It's where love, passion, determination, joy lies. So it's about balancing these systems, because also you want someone to tune into their limbic system, but in a way that's not considered as a threat. So I hope I've given you some insights into there's no choice. When we become limbic, we are just limbic. It is the way that it is until we get out of that intentionally. Otherwise, it just continues until the threat has passed. And even then, we still get that hangover. So, yeah.
And actually, this bit, we find that when we explain it out to clients can be quite an aha moment, because then they realize that why sometimes when they're agitated, stressed, anxious, and a lot of our clients are, they realize that actually they have no control, because this is a species level conversation. That's how the mind is engineered to work. So then they have to intentionally do something to switch on the PFC, and which is where our tools and techniques start coming in. And actually, one of them, if I was to tease out what Maria said, which is important, is to ask the question. Because if you ask the question, and we often do things like belief cycles, and we ask questions like, what's the evidence? Why am I? Is it a thought or a fact? The minute you ask a question, the PFC switches on, because the job of answering a question is not the limbic, it is the PFC. So what you start training people of saying that, aware of this limbic seesaw, and if you really want to access your amazing wisdom and have more choices, what you need to do is flip the seesaw. And therefore having circuit breakers, belief cycles, questions, and that can be quite a revelation to people, because they realize, oh, that's how I'm made. I have no choice. So I have to work around it. So that's quite an empowering moment as well. And look at how, I'm going to show you the next slide, which is quite interesting, which builds on this, which is from a slightly different angle, which is energy, which Maria talked about. And this is the one that I got trained with Bruce Schneider. It's an energy leadership index assessment. And what I want to draw your attention is to do two things. One is when the limbic system, or when the amygdala is into a fight, flight, freeze, it's using what we call catabolic energy. And when the PFC is working, it's using the anabolic energy. So for a moment, think the human, and I know some of you have heard me say this before, but for a moment, think that the energy, we all need energy as human beings, as a species. And it's on a spectrum. It's really on a spectrum, but just imagine it's on a spectrum. On one side, there's catabolic, which is adrenal cortisol, required, necessary. Actually, each one of us, when we wake up in the morning, the body shoots adrenaline through our system. That's how we get up. So important. But too much of adrenaline cortisol cortisol, I know it's a problem, right? So that needs to be handled. On the other side is the anabolic, which is dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin. That's when your PFC is functioning, you're feeling happy, excited, calm. So, that's the spread of energy. When the limbic system is working, it's using catabolic energy. So there are different energies being used for different actions. But let me draw your attention to the graph on the right-hand side because it shows an interesting insight. So as part of this energy leadership index assessment, it throws up how my energy spectrum is. And it's from level 1 to level 7. And 1 and 2 is catabolic energy. 3, 4, 5 is catabolic and anabolic energy, and 6 and 7 is anabolic energy. But look how interesting it is. When I am under stress, it is one person's report. When I'm under stress, my level 1 and 2, i.e., my catabolic energy, is so high, whereas in my day to day life, look at the level 1 and 2, it's dropped down. So it's really trying to help people understand the difference that happens in how the energy is used, but you can also start seeing how this framework helps people understand what are the emotions and thoughts that are leading to this energy kind of a usage as well. So from that perspective as well, giving them some tools to manage the limbic reaction, because when we are under stress, we have no kind of choice. So this is also another great thing to do, and also to just let them know, catabolic is good as well. As a species, we can't do without it, but you can manage it out. So that's the other angle that potentially we'd like to share with you on this particular one, which then brings us to the close on the content. But how do we apply it? Like, how do we use it? So I've got some ideas out here. If you've given people that understanding about this is how the PFC works, this is how the limbic works, this is the seesaw, this is what's happening. As a coach, you start helping them understand what is your limbic reaction, because there is a spread, and each of us might have a primary response, and you'll get a chance to look at your own primary response, because related to that are behaviors. So then they start understanding, when I have these behaviors, I'm basically limbic. And also then to start giving them ideas about what triggers it out or what might trigger it out. So they start thinking in advance or reflect on it. So that's another data point for them. Then you start giving stuff like, how do you diffuse it? How do you stay in a thrive mode rather than a survive mode? How do you use emotions? What is causing you stress? Then the questions kind of really go out. So they walk away with loads of information from just this one concept, which is quite powerful. Then what behaviors of mine are making other people limbic? Because when I go limbic, others go limbic too. So
Yeah,
you
emotions are contagious.
sorry,
Absolutely. Sorry, I couldn't help but say emotions are contagious, and we don't always notice that, especially as coaches. So it's really important that we are pushing the emotions in the other way back too.
yeah, true, so true. And so, it's you start, so this suddenly it starts decluttering. So by the way, one of the primary principles for the brains to start working on optimum condition is clarity. So what this does, it helps them understand, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. That's why people are reacting to me this way. Or this is why I'm reacting. That information and intelligence for professional and leaders is quite powerful, because we know that they're pretty much doing pretty well in their jobs. So they're intelligent. So once they have the data, they know what to do with it. So it's, in that sense, it's quite useful. So as a coach, you can then help them start figuring out about how do you influence teams, peers, seniors, family, friends when they're limbic. So you suddenly start giving them a lot of information, not just how you manage yourself, but how do you manage people around you who are limbic? And nowadays, well, pretty much everyone is limbic. And so suddenly topics, which we are talking about in coaching, which is toxic cultures, leading in crisis, conflict, all of those things, there's a layered insight you've offered them as a coach that helps them kind of address some of those things. So I think that's the content and the application, just to give you a sense and glimpse of how it is used. Sorry, I heard somebody speak. No? Okay. Can I do a quick check? Is this making sense? Are we kind of, any thumbs, any signs like, yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. So that's one concept. So what we'd love to do right now is give you a chance to figure out what your limbic response is, and which should be interesting as well. Okay, so let's do that. But before that, sorry, I forgot the slide was there. Before that, before we give you a limbic assessment, here's just a download of different things that you might see when we talk about a primary limbic response, i.e. the amygdala has got activated. The primary ones are the fight, flight, freeze. They were they were the primary ones that got created when our species was evolving. I was reading this very interesting book by Gabor Mate. In fact, I'm reading it right now, The Myth of Normal, in which he says this fact, which is a research-based fact of saying that actually as a civilization, we have probably been there 1% of the time that the human genome has actually existed. So think about it. These rules have been done out for a really long time. So while these are primary responses, there are many other limbic responses as well. We are going to do an assessment for you to check out between fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. The reason I'm bringing in fawn is because the first three were created to keep us safe from predators. Fawn is something that is coming up a lot because it's the survival mechanism. We are not low, we work with people, we are in a community, so that shows up as well. So we are going to be doing an assessment on those four, and the others are, different elements that we are seeing as well, which, as I said, neuroscience is an evolving subject, but these three remain as primary responses. So to the assessment. Okay. So you need a pen and paper, really? Like just a pen or something just to make a note, or if you're great in remembering and doing maths, that's superb as well. All I want you to do is I'm going to show you four boxes. Each box has got four statements. And I'll walk you through the first one, and then I'll just keep quiet while you do the rest. The question you're asking yourself is, when I am under stress, so when you are under stress, so when Karina is under stress, when Ming is under stress, when I'm under stress, do I do this never or rarely? Do I do this sometimes? Do I do this often? Or do I do this always? And depending upon that, you'll give yourself a score. So if I will never do it, put a 1 against that, otherwise sometimes, so on and so forth. So as I said, I'll just walk you through the first one. All I want you to do is write down the numbers for each of the statement. You don't have to write a statement, and then put down a total. So you'll have a total for each of the four boxes. So let's go for the first one.
And also, just to add to that, your first response is the one to take. Don't think about it, just go instantly the first thing that comes to your mind, because limbic's very primal. It's not a thinking thing, just to add.
Yeah, that's true. That's so true. That's so true. And also to say that all of us have a little bit of fight, flight, and freeze. What we are
Yeah.
trying to identify is what's the primary one. What are the few that are really stand out for you, because that's what you want to address. So the question being, when you are under stress, do you get angry? And that anger could be either confrontation, you get into a fight, or it could be a passive, I'm going to sulk, I'm going to shut down. So it could be an active anger or a passive anger, right? Do you start micromanaging? Do you start pushing decisions because you're trying to take control of the situation? So do you get into that kind of a behavior when you're under stress? Do you try to take control of others or the situation at hand? Because, and again, do you do that never, sometimes, often, always? Do you get defensive? Do you get touchy? Do you get snappy, blaming others? And again, put down a score out there when you're under stress, right? So you now have a number for each of the four boxes, total it up, and you have a final score. Just note it down somewhere so you know what it is. And I'm now going to just pop up the next three boxes and let you just do it. See what the score is. So the second column, if anybody has any question about any particular phrase out there, please just shout, unmute, and tell me. I love productive procrastination. Need to do something, but I'll be busy doing everything else rather than the thing that needs to be done. So the second box is about walking away, sense of panic. Again, keep trying to think, when I'm under stress, do I do that? Do I do that often, always, sometimes? Do I disengage? Do I ignore responsibilities? Avoid making a decision? Am I risk averse? The third box is, okay, I said I'll keep quiet, so let me keep quiet. If you can give me a thumbs up when you've got scores for each of those four boxes, that'll be amazing. Got a score? Okay, I can see some people's heads down. Pretty still.
Still working on what to do.
Sorry, Joseph?
I said I'm still working on what to do.
Ooh, that immediately makes me think, which one could that be? No, I'm just joking. Yeah, don't overthink as well. Even
So
if
do
there's...
you mean,
Sorry, Maria, go.
so were you thinking how to answer it, or are you saying what to answer and the mechanism of the assessment, Joseph?
Oh, good clarity.
It's the mechanism. What I thought we were doing was not what we're doing. So
Oh, okay, cool. Okay, so shall I just quickly go through it?
yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine now. I just
Oh,
need, yeah, thank you.
Oh, thank you for that. I'm glad you asked that, Maria. Thank you, Joseph, for saying that. Yeah, so just give yourselves a score on or a number to define what you do when you are under stress and how often you do it. So what's the frequency? And if some things you're not sure, take whatever you think is closest to what you think you know. Have we got that? I know Karen's got it because she's like, yeah, I did it. She's like, finished, quickly, done. Kate, I can see you nodding as well. A few other nods. Okay, so you got it, right? So great, you've got it. And the first box, whatever that number was a fight. The second is a flight. The third is a freeze. The fourth is a fawn. So now you know that. So I've just put down the labels out there. So now you have a number for a fight, a flight, a freeze, and a fawn. And maybe a couple of them stand out more, or maybe one stands out more. So you have a number for each one of them. Actually, at this time, before we tell you about application, I'm just thinking it'd be pretty cool if we could do a poll and let's see in this group what the spread is. It's not one choice. We're allowing you to take many choices. So if you felt that two of them were on the highest side, just make a choice and see what do you think. I know what I am. My primary is fight. Clearly, it's a fight that I get into. So I'm going to choose fight because I know that about me.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, fight for myself, fight for everybody else, fight for the world.
Yeah.
Fight.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, Gadi, whenever you can, if you share, I'm curious to know. Interesting.
That
Okay.
so doesn't surprise me about a bunch of coaches. It really doesn't. Now, if it was a different set of different cohort, but for a bunch of coaches, that so doesn't surprise me.
Okay, so that's interesting. So you can also start seeing how it can be quite a valuable information because there is a spread. And the implications is if I'm fight, when I go into stress, I expect the world to fight. But if you're a flight and a freeze, you're going to disengage. So as leaders, you're like, but why is nobody engaging with me? I say, but I can't. You know, so it's quite valuable for them to start getting those kind of things. And then what do you do about it as well? But Maria, do you want to take it away on the next slide about, so this is really for your benefit. Now that you know your primary limbic response, here are some questions that then immediately starts giving you insights about what do you do with the data. So I'm going to just pop back the slide on and Maria's going to take it away.
Brilliant. When we know what we do, generally, most of the time, then we get the chance to take more data points. You know, what are the situations then? Why does that trigger me? Why does that do that to me? And what's my emotional response? Because like we said in the boxes, you may be angry, but it's not necessarily that you express that anger, but that anger is still residing in you. And as we all know, people pick up our mood. You can be the most quiet person, but we know when someone's cheesed off. We know when someone's angry. So it's about knowing what our own emotional response is, and also where is it in the body, because you know the brain isn't just between the two ears. So therefore, there are other parts of you that will let you know where your stress is happening. You know, anxiety is very often in the sort of mid-tummy area, whereas anger, I know I'm angry without even knowing I'm angry, because suddenly I look down at my hands and they're in a little bit of a fist. And I'm like, oh, okay, I hadn't realized I was low-level stressed. And how long does it stay? It's about knowing if you're in this also, and that's what the program would be able to give you, are all the hacks then. If I'm in anger, what do I do to get it going through me quicker, but acknowledging it, because emotions are so important. The brain uses emotions as data points. The amygdala uses emotions as data points. It doesn't use thinking and intellectualization. How I feel changes whether my amygdala is kicking off or whether it's nicely calm. So it's also knowing how long and what you can do about it. And if I am anger, which is my limbic response, what are my automatic thoughts? Because once I know that, when they come through, I know that that's just my default position. It's not necessarily what I'm thinking. It's just what I always think at the time when I am feeling under stress. So it gives us that opportunity to manage ourselves. Sometimes with clients, they can say things that can provide an emotional response in us, and we need to be able to manage that out, you know? So it's not just about how our clients are feeling, but also managing how we are interacting with our clients. And then in the powerful way of using it with our clients, you can explore their patterns. If someone is often angry, that is usually their limbic response. How do we get them out of that? And also, one of the things that I've seen, and Reena will attest to too, once that relief comes through, oh, it's my brain. This is everyone's brain does this. It gives people a distance to stop judging themselves perhaps so harshly, so that they understand their emotional triggers, as opposed to, you know, it's the cliche, see the emotion, don't be the emotion. It's that kind of thing. So it allows people to have it. It's not me. This is what happens when I am under stress. I get the 4 choices. This is how I act. Well, how can I manage that out better then? What can I do? What are the strategies I can develop? And also, how do I reframe my thoughts? Because if we are limbic and we want to turn on our PFC, certain questions and certain reframes instantly calms it, because it goes up quick, but it also comes down quite quickly if we ask the right questions at the right time. Reena, you're on mute, but
Thank you. Thank you very much. And actually, while we do have, you know, there's tons more that you do with the person, we start with this because, you know, and I know that self-awareness is half the battle. Once they know it, that's when they start getting choices. And we stay with that awareness building, because when you're limbic, you don't have the insight you have when you're discussing it when you're in a calm state. So really fleshing it out and giving them the choices. So when it happens, they're like, ah, right, okay. You know, so you've suddenly given them agency in a lot of ways. So that's a wee bit of content that we wanted to share with you, and hopefully you've got a little tiny bit of insight, which has either made you think, I always knew that about me, or it was like, really? But what you've also started realizing, if you had one, like, for example, if I fight, so can you imagine when I go limbic, I don't even have 3 choices. I have one choice, which is fight. So forget about my PFC, which would think about collaborating, being a risk taker, all of that. It's fight. That's the mode I'm in. So I think so that insight as a nugget can be quite powerful as well. So we're going to close on the content right now. I just want to draw up a slide, because this is, to be honest, a glimpse of what we can do with it.
yeah,
But bring up
tiny.
some. Oh, sorry. Yes. Yes.
I was just saying it's such a tiny section of all the other things that, you know, feed into that.
Speaking of which, this is what the program, just want to give you a slight an understanding about what the program would be covering when we go through it. It is under design, so we want to give you a flavor. So some of the things we've been talking about. So really to give people an understanding about how the whole brain system works. So it's not just the brain between your ears, how does it interconnect, and just give enough information, not that we become biology professors, but to have enough ammunition to explain to a client what really is happening in you is this. And so you kind of get that information, but also to understand different aspects of the brain. When I did my MIT course, I found it really useful to understand the different functions of the limbic system and even the different parts, because suddenly it became very real and tangible to me rather than something's happening in my head. I don't know what. So it gives some information around that. Going to do the intersectionality with neurobiology because it impacts the mind-body connection. We talked a little bit about emotions and moods. There's actually something known as mirror neurons, which can be used to influence people. Uh, in organizations today, logic and thinking logically is important and perhaps given too much of currency, because actually people think differently and we're not even getting into neurodiversity. So just people think differently. So really give people an understanding about cognitive diversity is the other elements. Give a deep dive on brain operating principles. You've got a taste of a couple of them here. We haven't even gone down to neuroplasticity and myelination. Neuroplasticity, again, a term you would have used to really give you an insight about what happens, how it happens, and how it can actually be against or how it contrasts against myelination, which is the reason why we find it difficult to break habits, which is why sometimes when I hear statements like the authenticity paradox or fake it till you make it, I'm like, well, you mean to say you're talking about myelination, right? So a lot of these phrases that we use in coaching are linked to science. So rather than making a really cute remark like fake it till like make it, you explain to them, this is what I mean by it. So they're like, right, that's what I mean by it, kind of stuff. You've seen the PFC limbic seesaw. That's what we're going to be talking about how do you regulate the amygdala. Great model by David Rock, which is the SCARF model about how do you regulate your own limbic response, but that of other people as well. There's a framework that I've created over a period of time, which is the neuro circuit breakers and reframes. That's something that we would love to bring into the program as well. The role of epigenetics, which leads to organization cultures and what leaders are doing to create the culture that they are in, because we get impacted by what's happening around us. So what's the role of epigenetics? I can't say that word right now, but you know what I mean.
Epigenetics.
Then there's the
It's
lead.
one of my favorites, so I can say it.
Yeah, true. Then actually the lead faculty for MIT is Tara Swart. Some of you all might have seen her. She's pretty much out there right now, and she has an interesting model of really taking how the brain system works into an organization, and therefore how can you create agile organizations. And Natalia, you'll remember that because you've done the MIT program as well. Then we'd also like to bring forward the intersectionality of applied neuroscience and neurodiversity and counseling and AI and inclusion, because that's what we've been working on as coaches. So how does those two work together with each other? And then not surprisingly, tied back to some of the ancient practices, why certain things were listed out, because actually all of them are now being proven time and again by neuroscience. So that's the bit that we would like to also bring in. So just a glance, that is the kind of topics. Each have got subtopics, but just wanted to give you a flavor of what the program is going to be all about. It's going to be modular, the program. So we're going to break it up into modules. We expect the entire program to be 16 hours spread over Jan to March. We're looking at two models. One is a hybrid, whereby we'd like to have a one-day workshop in person in London and the rest virtual. And then we're also looking at the model of doing something which is going to be completely virtual, because you know and I know there's a beauty of doing things in person as well. So we'd like to do that that's the idea behind it. It's going to be theory and highly application oriented, but also we are going to tap into the group wisdom. We're all coaches. So after you've gone through the concepts and the theory, we're going to run a couple of sessions which are actually going to be led by the participants so that you really get a chance to then take it to that next level. And then also create space of saying, if there are coaching frameworks that you're currently using, that you love, you adore, how does that integrate now that you know this? So we'll support in that integration process as much as we can. If there's a deeper dive required, we're ready to take it offline, but we'll create some space during the program for coaches to do that. We are looking at credible sources. So some of the names you can see on this slide, but we're looking at certain chosen credible sources that Maria and I have access to. Obviously, you'll have Maria and I as the coaches. And actually, while we're going to learn hard, we're going to do it in a playful way because the brain, well, learns best when we are playing. There's a stat around this, isn't it, Maria? You keep telling me
Yep,
about a stat.
Dr. Jarvis just came out with the stat that says if you want to learn something new, it takes 400 repetitions-ish.
Wow.
If you add an element of playfulness, it takes between 10 and 20.
Wow, that's a big shift. So we are going to bring in that thing about, what is tell it? And actually, that's one of the reasons why clients love it too. Because
Yeah.
when they get this data, it's like, oh, so it's a game. That's how I play it. That's how it's a very different mindset altogether. And last but not the least, the program is going to be for those who want it, be CPD accredited. And of course, going to have a little extra effort because you'll have to do some assessments, a little bit of cost attached to it, but we want to offer that opportunity as well. And licenses to use some of the tools that we have created as well. And hopefully a little bit more fun and confidence to run and use this and integrate it and make it part of the program. So this is just at a glance to give you a flavor of what the program is going to look like, feel like, and contain. And I just feel like we've spoken a lot, but luckily I'm at the last. Is there any other slide? Well, this is the last slide. This is what we said we'd do. This is hopefully what we've done.